Welcome to Music Crush, a new music podcast hosted by the Flute New Music Consortium. I'm Nicole Reiner.
And I'm Elizabeth Robinson.
And announcing FNMC Presents, an album of previous commissions and competition winners performed by members of the Flute New Music Consortium. Repertoire includes works by Sean O'Pevolo, Joseph Hallman, Becca Sims, Cherie Slider, and others. Purchase a copy today. All proceeds go directly to FNMC. Flute New Music Consortium, Inc. is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Your contributions are tax deductible to the extent allowed by the law. Visit www.flutenewmusicconsortium.com for details. Jane Rigleler is a flutist, composer, educator, and producer known for her innovations in new flute performance, techniques, and unique musical vocabulary. She teaches introductory computer music, sound art, deep listening-based interdisciplinary courses, contemporary performance practice ensemble classes, flute, composition, improvisation, and she co-taught humanities courses in the music program within the Visual and Performing Arts Department at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. Before living in Colorado, she lived for 9 years in Spain as a performing flutist and improviser. When she returned to the U.S. in 2003, she landed in New York City to perform with contemporary ensembles, improvise, and compose electroacoustic pieces all over the city. She worked with several arts organizations, such as the Lincoln Center Institute and the Orchestra of St. Luke's, where she helped launch a young composer program in the New York City schools. Her most notable work is for the Manhattan New Music Project, where she spent several years working and researching music education programs for underserved populations and children with disabilities. Jane is the author of The Vocalization of the Flute, a manual, and originally her PhD dissertation, demonstrating both new and ancient methods of singing while playing the flute. It also incorporates several of her own compositions. She has received the U.S.-Japan Friendship Commission and a Fulbright, and other grants that have given her the opportunity to collaborate and compose new works, which have been performed all over the world by other flutists. Jane, hi, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Yeah, I have been an admirer of your career for years and your music as well. And one of the things I've noticed you are doing, it looks like a lot of these days, is deep listening sessions.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to start out by asking you a few questions about this newer part of your life. Can you tell us about the program and about the certification process?
Yeah, sure. So I knew about deep listening many, many years ago. I did my master's and PhD at University of California in San Diego. So I knew that Pauline had been there and that she was one of the founders of the experimental music department there. And she came probably my first year maybe there, or the second year I was there. So it must have been around like 91, 92. And I was completely confused and honored and delighted and amazed by this amazing human being, like this incredible human being who she came in. We did a concert. We did a concert. We came in as an audience into the studio where they do recordings and asked everyone to sit on the floor, and then proceeded to tell us about the tuning meditation and read the description of it, the text score, basically. And we all started lying down and humming. And some people fell asleep and started snoring. And I was like stupefied. I was like, what is going on? Like, what is this, her concert, or is this our concert, or what's going on here? And I realized that she, after studying more, after she had gone and hearing her talk, she gave a talk, and, hearing her talk and then studying her more and really kind of learning more about her. And I'd already known some things, like she was the, electronic music, one of the few women American electronic pioneers, electronic music pioneers. And so I knew about her, but I didn't really know her about what she was doing with her work in deep listening, which is a multisensorial experience for all people, inclusive of all people, to attend to both an inner and external and a focused and a global kind of listening. It's multisensorial in the fact that she invites us to listen with more than just our ears. We are invited to listen with our whole bodies, internally, our memories, our imagination, our past, our future, our dreams. And with this comes a kind of human experience that kind of goes against the grain of the traditional hierarchy of the composer at the tip of the triangle of genius.
Right.
And then the genius virtuoso performer, and then the audience passively, takes it in. Oh. It brings us all into the whole space-time continuum, as she says, of experience, of attending, of being present. And so I, ran into her at many festivals throughout my years after that, as I became a professional musician and started really, performing improvisation as well as with electronics, as well as other pieces as an interpreter. And so we crossed paths in a variety of places. And finally, we got a chance during these festivals. I met her in Bogota once, and we had a chance to really, talk to her at this festival, her and Ione. So Pauline created the deep listening certificate with her two friends. One, her partner, Ione, who is a psychotherapist and dreamer and a playwright and a poet and a writer. And then Eloise Gold, who is a dancer, a choreographer, a Tai Chi master, and Qigong master. And together, the three of them founded deep listening between the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. And so she developed the Deep Listening Institute. And as she aged, and so they would do these retreats, right? And they would go to different parts of the US and different parts of the world, and invite all people, non-musicians, anyone who wanted to come, to have these week-long or 10-day-long retreats where they would basically workshop these text scores, right? And create new ones. And that is why she has such a prolific number of scores, text scores, which she calls sonic meditations. And then they created so as she aged, she created the Deep Listening Institute and wanted to, she had so much interest in it that she wanted to create a certificate program. And, she was at UC San Diego, but then, left academia. She was, I think she had a tenure track or was tenured, I'm not sure. And she just got up and left and started her work in deep listening and focused all of her attention on that and being a solo artist and composer. And this she did when she was in her 50s.
Wow.
And as she got into her 70s, she realized that she wanted this to proliferate and to expand. And there was so much interest that she created the certificate program. And she did this online. She was not afraid of what we now are Zooming, but at the time it was Google Meetups and Skype, even before that or around the same time. And she was already doing telematic concerts and writing about telematic performance. And they were already into that kind of world where she called it this sort of holographic interaction, where we meet on all these different spaces. And in 2014, I went to, I think at that time it was the second, could have been the second, it might have been the first, Deep Listening and Science conference at Rensselaer Polytech Institute. She started teaching at Bard University, Mills, and RPI, Rensselaer Polytech Institute. I can't remember exactly the dates of when she was where, but she was kind of in all three places in various ways throughout, her 60s, 70s, and early 80s, as she passed when she was 84 in 2016. In 2014, when I went to the RPI conference, I realized I had found my people. I
Wow.
found my people because, first of all, it was a global community of people interested in both intuitiveness, dreams, imagination, and science, which is something that I'm really, really interested in as well. All of these things. It encompasses the curiosity of all of these things, ancient practices with the newest technology. I just find that amazing and something that I'm really interested in. And I was already doing that. I'd already been composing music that was inspired by ancient practices, improvisation, game techniques, imagination and dreams. So I was already doing this. And then I was like, oh my God. And I was already into, electronics and working with Maximus P and creating my little trigger system on my flute and doing, quadraphonic system performances and all of that stuff. So I was really interested in these worlds. And I should say I do a lot of residencies, and I did get an RPI residency. I think it was maybe 2006, I got a residency. And so I got to see her facilitate her deep listening with the students at RPI. And I just thought she was some sort of deity. I mean, she was working primarily with young men, right? So young men who, in their 20s and, these kind of big macho sports, technology guys, and they're all like doing qigong and talking about their dreams. And I was like, what? How did you do that? I just had her on this big pedestal because I was like, that was amazing. So I got into the certificate in 2015. And it was at that time a year-long program with her, Ione, and Eloise, and with a series of 3 other mentors. And so the 3 mentors are now like my best friends. I mean, I just love these people so much. And after I completed the year-long program, I got the certificate, and in 2016, right before she passed, she said, I really want you to be one of the mentors, one of the facilitators online to teach the certificate. And I said, I'm too green. I'm not ready. I'm not. And she's like, you're ready. And I said, I don't think I can do it. I'm not good enough yet. I just didn't have the confidence. And then when she passed a few months later, I called Tomie Han, who was at that time. So at that time, right before she passed, the Deep Listening Institute turned into the Center for Deep Listening at RPI. So now people can sign up for classes and enroll in the Deep Listening certificate program through RPI as a student. And so they were starting this whole program in 2016, where we would be working online, the facilitators, with anyone around the world could come and join. And we turned it into a 6-month program. And then it wasn't a year-long program, it was a 6-month program when we changed it. And I didn't think I was ready. But then when she passed, I called Tomie Han, who was the director at the time. And I said, I think I have the message that I need to be a teacher through this. Is it still okay? And she's like, absolutely. So I've been teaching through the deep listening and on my own, because once you get a certificate, you sort of get the stamp of approval from Ione and Eloise and Pauline that you can now call it the deep listening work. So
Right.
I've been facilitating. Oh my gosh. So part of the program was that you facilitate, that you already start. So I'd been facilitating monthly workshops on campus here for the whole community, free. And then I started charging and started calling myself a, certified certificate holder. And I've done this everywhere from, oh my gosh, everywhere. Everywhere I go, I do deep listening. So small little tiny village in France to Helsinki to Lapua, Finland to Germany and Italy and Spain and France and South America and Alaska and wherever I go, I do deep listening now. And I've been composing, and I teach, about text scores, because I think they're very well crafted. If you look at her scores, they're extremely well crafted. The way and the scaffolding and the way that she introduces the pieces and the way that she thinks about composition, right? And music and all of the elements, the musical elements, like silent, like these alternations between these contrasts between sound on, right, and off. So silence and sound, macro and micro, tempo, textures, volume, your relationship between you and yourself and the neighbor, and then the environment, and then anything else, your ancestors, your dreams, like all of this interrelational thing that happens in music anyway. Like music is just, for me, all about relationship, even just from one note to the next note. That's the relationship, right, between sound on and off. So she really taught me a lot about how can I make accessible these wondrous musical events without even calling it music. It doesn't have to be music per se, right? We don't have to try to make music. We can just be. And then these things start to happen. These wondrous, magical relationships, right? Start to happen. And you can call it music or not. I don't care what you call it, but it's real. It's there, it's happening, and we're in it, and we're involved, and we're doing this together as a community. And they have this beautiful thing called lift off judgment, LOJ. And so it's this acceptance of like, this moment, this is what's available to me right now. I can orient to myself, to the others, to the space, to what's happening in this moment. And through this method, or this practice, really, it's really a practice because it's kind of ongoing and evolving. We develop together this beautiful relationship of sounds and interbeing, right? And she called it sonic meditation, but it's not meditation like you must focus and all things must clear from your mind. It's more like just attention. What's available to you now that you can pay attention to at this moment?
That sounds amazing. Right. Could you take us through a deep listening session of yours? And perhaps also for people who are listening and not familiar with the term, maybe explain what the text scores are that you're using.
The first thing I do, if it's just an introductory workshop, I kind of explain a little bit, less detail than now about myself, but a little bit of detail about deep listening as this multisensorial experience and the modes of attention. This focused, where you focus your attention or listening attention to maybe one thing, right? And all other things kind of go in the background, or kind of like if you were on a mixing board and you put the channel up of one particular sound. And the difference between that and global, the sort of diffused sound where you take it all in. And so I talk about internal and external listening and LOJ. And the next thing that I do after I sort of explain a little bit about deep listening and Pauline and Ione and Eloise is that I invite people to move, because moving and being in the body is an essential part of the deep listening experience. And so we get up and I show them movements that Eloise taught and is still teaching us, all of us still. Again, everything about deep listening is still evolving, and Eloise is still helping us evolve with the body parts of it. So I get people moving and playing and being silly and just like, I do these little activities where we're like what we call blopping and kind of shaking it out gently. And so I teach them about, grounding. I teach them about being playful. I don't really teach. I would just say I facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
So I facilitate this moment of where we can sort of be in our bodies wherever we're at today. After we do that, we warm up. And we warm up our listening bodies, our whole body listening experience. Then I will invite them to experience some of the sonic meditations. And one of the first ones that I do usually when I invite people to the first time is the one by Pauline called Imaginary Meditation. And I love this one because for me in my research around sound and composing is that sound comes from the imagination. That's what I think. I think sound originates in dreams and thoughts and imagination. Now, even the word imagination isn't quite right because imagine has the element of image in it, and sound. And we talk about sound a lot through image words. So Pauline took a word from an architect called oralization. And oralization is the equivalent of imagination, but sound. So this sort of like listening through your mind's ear is to oralize. So I invite people to the imaginary meditation that she wrote because it's so well crafted. There's only 5 questions and they all begin with, can you imagine something, right? And blah, blah, blah. And so it's an invitation. You don't even have to do it if you don't want to, because you can answer the question like, well, no, I can't imagine it. And I don't want to, and I don't feel like it. But they're so cool that you end up like, most people just end up like, wow, can you imagine the sound of your own resonance? And it's like, I don't know. Can I? Right. And each one is so well crafted. And she goes, I could read you the 5 questions if you want me to.
That'd be great.
Can you imagine your own resonance? Can you imagine listening beyond the edge of your own imagination? Can you imagine that every cell in your body is vibrating all the time? Can you imagine the tuning of the universe? And can you imagine the echoes of all the footsteps you have ever taken? Now, in an actual workshop, I would take a lot more time between each one. People might be lying down or sitting very comfortably. And I would allow time for each question to just manifest whatever it might manifest for each person, right? And then I usually will ask at the end, once I also prepare people. So I prepare people to be in their body and to be feeling comfortable, I guess would be the word. And then I prepare them to come out of it as well. So it's not like, okay, everybody, now let's get up and jump around,
Right.
And then what I do is I ask this question, like, what was your favorite question and why? And it usually elicits a beautiful conversation in the room. Because some people, there might be 2 or 3 people that had the same one that really elicited something really, really amazing for them. So then if it's a music group, like if it's composers, I might say, let's actually analyze this. Right? Because the first question is, can you imagine your own resonance? Which is kind of like, where is that coming from? It's coming from you, somewhere within you. What does that even mean? It's kind of vague, but still about sound. What would I sound like if I resonated? And the word resonate is almost like a reverberation. So how far out do you resonate? Like it's sort of very provocative in that way. And then can you listen beyond the edge of your own imagination? I mean, that's like beyond you, beyond outside of what you possibly could be, right? And she's really asking you to listen beyond yourself and your own listening, right?
Right.
And then she brings you right back into the every single cell of your body vibrating. So she's doing this constant, like going out and in and out and in. And the tuning meditation, which is another one of her most famous sonic meditations, is really amazing because, again, it alternates. She asks you to alternate between imagining your own sound, your inner sound, and singing or humming it out, that sound, that tone, then listening to somebody else's and tuning as best as you can to their sound, and then singing your own and giving it to the group. There's a lot of sending and receiving in deep listening, and then receiving someone else's and tuning to theirs and then sending it out. And so it's this constant, like, inner listen, outer listen, right? And she does this a lot. And so this has been very influential for me as a composer, as a performer, as an improviser, as a teacher. So yeah, and I could go on and on more about this and what the direction I'm taking in, but I'll stop there because I've already been talking a lot.
It sounds exhausting. I mean, in the best possible way, but even just that tiny little taste that you've given us, and I'm sure that's, there are so many more layers to it. I mean, just thinking about really genuinely considering all of these points in this experience. I mean, it seems so all-encompassing. It seems huge.
It is huge. And it's interesting that you use the word exhausting, because I think what it is that it's calming us down. And that experience of calming the nervous system down really can remind oneself how exhausted we are in our lives,
Right.
In our everyday lives. Our everyday lives are exhausting. And we're all at the end of our rope in some way, right? And so it's so important for me to remind ourselves to say, okay, it's okay if you're exhausted. You should be. Right? And if this feels too much, because this sometimes can be overwhelming, or it could trigger a sense of overwhelm, merely because we're slowing down and because we're being asked to not judge. We're being asked to be our full selves, just as we are today. And as a flutist, that was never really an option in my life. I've always had to prove myself and work harder, and it was never good enough, and always pushing. And I didn't get into being a professor at a university until my 40s. So I was a freelance, just like trying to make it all work,
Right.
Constantly writing grants, constantly out there making things happen. And I was never feeling like it was ever enough, right? And in deep listening, you are enough, just right the way you are right now. And it's a very vulnerable place to be, when you realize that you're okay, you're great, you're just where you're supposed to be. This is just perfect right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can we talk about travel?
Sure.
You've lived in a lot of places and spent substantial time in a lot of places, I guess I should say. Not a week-long pop-in for a little tour, but extended periods of time doing residential work. You lived in Spain for what, 9 years?
Yes.
Very long. But you've also spent a substantial amount of time in Japan, Finland, Ireland, as you alluded to a little bit earlier, probably some other places I'm missing as well. And my first thought was, as an aspirational traveler, I don't travel as much as I would like to. but it's definitely a goal as I continue to age. And I wanted to ask you about each one of these places, which would turn this into a 5-hour podcast at least. But could you, maybe sometime, but could you, if it's not too brief, you know, tell us what it's like living in any of these places, or maybe just another place for a while. How does it affect you as an artist, as a thinker, each
Oh my
time that
gosh.
you pick up and move somewhere new to work?
It's vital for me to learn about other perspectives, other ways of thinking, other worldviews. And learning another language is the way in. Because when you learn another language, you get a window into a way of thinking and a philosophy around life. Because sometimes the words are ordered differently, or you need less words. There's a lot of words in the English language. And you need certain words. And then those certain words sometimes have double, triple sub meanings. And you learn about the poetry of expression. And when you go to a place and you live there with people and you listen to the patterns of these languages and the intonations and the flexibility of the way the mouth moves when you speak differently, you have to move your mouth in a different way. It's very physical. Then you become this other person almost, because you have to move, you have to physically, people talk differently, they move differently when they talk. You can always tell a person on the street, even if you can't hear them. The person from Madrid you can tell they're from Madrid. You can see them from far away. They're doing this gesture that's very Madrid, madrileño. You know, they have this very specific way of moving, you know, versus a person from Japan. You don't even have to see them move their mouth, but you can see the face and the way they hold their body and the way the mouth moves, you know, that it's something different, you know. And so there's this new way of thinking about life and philosophy, time. Again, it's all related to music to me, because it's about how people deal with time, right? You go to, oh my gosh, to like, you know, Venezuela, and, you know, they say, ahora mismo, like something's going to happen right this very minute. And ahora mismo in Caracas, or you know, in certain parts of, you know, Argentina or Venezuela are going to be completely different ahora mismo, like right now in Spain, or like in London, or like, you know, time. Just one's perception of time is just so different in all these different parts of the world, and it's such a beautiful experience to live in different time dimensions. Does that make sense? Like, you are now living your body according to some other time perception.
Yeah.
And so that changes, again, the way you play music, the way you think about sound, the way you pick up your instrument, the way you move across the stage, the way you know, I mean, for me, it was always about how fast can you react, and fast. And then suddenly it's like, oh, you know, fast in relationship to what else? Like, is there like, and so then I started really learning, like in Japan, I took no lessons. And everyone I tell, you know, no theater, like, yes, like, oh, you learned the flute? I'm like, no, I learned walking and chanting, how to hold a fan, you know, and, you know, and the whole stay, like the acting part of it.
Right.
And people are like, why? Why would you like that? You know, and like, well, because it was fascinating, you know, and I wanted to embody ancient practices, you know, even though it was only like, you know, 6 months, which is nothing, but it gave me a chance to really appreciate time and my body settling into the ground. And this, I took Aikido, which allowed me to learn about this spiral energy that's like all around you. that helps you kind of, you're sort of like riding the wave of this energy, right? They teach you the form, and then you do the form, and then somehow the form throws the person across the room. Like you didn't even have anything to do with it. It's like crazy. It's like amazing. It's like
Oh.
spiritual or something. And so I incorporated all of this into my music, and I started composing pieces that I'd always wanted to do, but was always too afraid. So I started composing pieces with movement and giving the performer directives of how to move across, what to do in this place. So I have convex origins and all the more my thoughts multiply, and a piece that Erica Boyson, commissioned, Dreaming in Its Shadows. And, so I'm incorporating movement into my pieces now, so that the performers are learning about their body and space, about time, and the relationship between sound and space, and the electronic part that's happening in their instrument. So I would say that living in another country and really being in it,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like just traveling for a week, like you said. I really love, I love languages. When I went to Ireland, I learned, I took Welga. When I was in Japan, I took Japanese. Um, I just love, and when I was in Italy for Civitella Raineri, I took Italian lessons, because I'm really interested in, I think I really love being a chameleon, or I love how we can become other, and how that other is helping me, more complete, more whole. And it's more than just being a musician. It's about being a whole person, that empathy, that, realizing the humanity, like, that's just out there, that we are all connected to. And not just to humans, but to animals, objects, trees, bird, just all the things that are out there, that are in our environment. And so that's what traveling has helped me do.
And so now you've landed in Colorado, of all places. I say this with affection because I've also landed in Colorado, but not only is it, being back in the States, but I think of Colorado compared to a lot of other places that you have visited or stayed, as being pretty rural, pretty young, extremely young compared to many cultures. Not a very deeply ingrained arts culture in the same way that even, Eastern United States might have. What has this been like for you? Is this also when you started teaching, working in academia? Is University of Colorado Springs the first academic position you? So that's huge. This is a lot of change all at once. What has it been like for you coming back, and then also fitting yourself into academia? What kinds of shifts in thinking, creating, etc. has this required of you?
Well, I'm a kind of a stubborn person. Like, I refused point blank to ever be an adjunct. And I just don't think the system is fair. I think I have a lot of opinions about it. And I also never really did that many like weddings, or I always thought, like, music for me is this art form. And I think of myself as an artist, and whatever I do to make money is going to promote that. And whatever I do with the flute is going to promote my trajectory as an artist. So I've always, like, when I came back from Spain, I was a teaching artist in New York City. And so I did work as a teaching artist, which was really fascinating, because I was either overqualified or underqualified in all the wrong ways. I worked a lot with children with disabilities, and but I always felt like there was a limit to what I could really do with it. So when I went to Japan, so I was in New York, I was in Spain, then New York. And when I went to Japan, while I was there, a colleague of mine who was a graduate from UC San Diego asked me if I wanted to be an instructor, not an adjunct, but it's kind of like a glorified adjunct
Right.
at UCCS. And I thought, well, you know, I think I'm going to need to get my foot in the door in academia somehow. And I've applied to so many jobs, and I think of myself, I think I must be to others a very weird flutist. I could never get any jobs because I just don't want to do like certain things. I want to expand the instrument, and I want to explore, and I want to do all these things, and I just don't want to play woodwind quintets right now. So I really was very adamant that I was like secure in like what I wanted to do with the flute. So when he said, do you want to be in this instructor position? It's part-time, maybe it'll go into full-time, I'm working on it. It might even turn into a tenure track. He kept putting a little carrot in front of me. And
Right.
I said, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll get my foot in the door. Right. And I'll have that experience. Well, it did turn into a permanent position, a full-time position. And I thought to myself, my logic was, oh, I'm going to write as many grants as possible and bring as many people to UCCS as possible. And that way I'll get, it'll be a stepping stone to another place, right? I'll be able to have something that I've gotten all these grants and I did all this work at UCCS, and then I can move somewhere else that's a bigger music department. What happened was I got all the grants and I brought all these people, including Pauline. I brought Pamela Z and Mia Masaoka and Pauline Oliveros and Morton Subotnick and Philip Blackburn and just all these really cool people. And they ended up turning my position, like they ended up saying like, oh, we now need, he had more justification to turn it into a tenure track.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been applying to other places, but again, I'm just a little bit weird enough that it's hard because I'm not like a composer where I like compose orchestra pieces or operas. And I'm not like a full-on, orchestra player. I'm this kind of weird, vague, everything strange flutist who does deep listening. But the people here really liked it, and they were really interested in me doing and developing interdisciplinary work. So it made sense for me to just develop what I was developing here and use it and use this opportunity to develop my way of thinking about teaching too. It's really changed since I've been here. I mean, totally different now than I am. I've been here 13 years. And now I'm just all about deep listening. Like I call it infiltrating deep listening into everything I teach, including computer music, and everything I'm doing has got some deep listening in it in some way, shape, or form. And I'm much more interested in developing the whole person. And there haven't been a whole lot of flutists here, unfortunately. Yeah, so I do a lot of like, not a lot, but I do, people ask me for their masters. I work really good with master's students, for example. So I give like Zoom lessons. We just had the Summer Institute for Contemporary Performance Practice here. It was here, also known as Sick Puppy. So they were here. There was a grad student, and I had wonderful time working with him on Barrio. So yeah, I mean, I love teaching. I really, really do. I work at CU Boulder. Christina Jennings has invited me in, and I've done deep listening with her students while teaching them Frinny Ho, Right. So I really feel like it's so important to bring in this aspect of, where we are now and how we're listening and how we're playing our instrument in this kind of holistic way. Because I also, I wrote a manual for singing while playing the flute. That was my dissertation. And so this idea of bringing in the singing and the whole body and the movement and learning all these different techniques with other players, improvisers, really has helped me build a vocabulary that is beyond what they call extended techniques, which usually just means really ancient techniques that are being applied to this 18th and 19th century instrument. But yeah, I feel like I've just learned a lot of really ancient techniques, circular breathing. I mean, all of those things are ancient practices.
Right.
And so how do we bring them into our palette of colors, of sounds to express ourselves.
Well, speaking of expression and I guess inspiration, what are some artists or mediums that inspire you in your music making?
Laurie Anderson was the first person who really blew my mind. Like, what?
Nice.
You can tell a story. Like, I really feel like I'm a storyteller, and I've always thought that what I do is storytelling. So she really helped me, give me the confidence to use electronics and incorporate the voice into that. Meredith Monk is another one, an artist who really, really kind of her, and all these other vocal artists that I worked with, have worked with and been fortunate enough, really helped me realize the flexibility and the power of the voice. So, and that you don't necessarily need text, right? To say something really universal. Another artist who was really, really influential for me too, both of them in Spain. One is a man named Wade Matthews, who's an American, but lives in Spain and lived in Morocco and lived in France. I mean, he speaks like at least 3 languages, if not more. He's a free improviser who really got me thinking I was already thinking a certain way, and he just allowed me the expression to listen to myself and the world. He's a really wonderful musician, Wade Matthews. And another musician, Agustí Fernandez, who's lives in Barcelona, pianist, who also really pushed me. Both of these musicians really, really pushed me to think outside my box and really got me exploring. Working with people like, Butch Morris and Walter Thomspon. Yeah, Walter Thomspon. Working with Butch Morris, working with Walter Thomspon in sound painting, and all the musicians that they, worked with, and when I was in New York, also really got me thinking differently. I would say that the musicians that I've performed with, Shoko, Nagai, lots of people who I've performed with, have given me something, to really think about. And I love collaborating, and I love playing with flutists. So I play a lot with flutists. I have a dear, dear friend, Alessandro Rombola, who's Italian. We did a lot of stuff together when I was living in Spain. She's Italian, but lived in Spain, in Madrid, when I did. So, and Lisa Cella, a flutist I performed with a lot and traveled with. Tessa Brickman, another flutist I've been performing with. And right now I composed a piece last year as a part of this project that called In Reverence of a Blue Heart. And it's a piece that I was sort of selected to participate in this project called Polar Sounds. And the Polar Sounds project is part of a collaboration of this group called the Cities and Memories. And it's at the Helmholtz Institute for Functional Marine Biodiversity and the Alfred Weniger Institute and Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research. And they put a call out for sound artists who would like to perform with recordings that scientists had made in the Arctic, in the Antarctic, in these different polar regions. And I was selected. And of course, there's no money involved. I just wanted to do it because I love this kind of stuff. And so I composed a work with a blue whale, the sound of a blue whale, a 2-toned call of the blue whale. And I composed this work for bass flute. I was really, really, really interested in the lowest possible frequencies because, I always compose pieces for like piccolo and like flute and, all these high frequencies. And so I made this piece. And when I showed it to Tessa and Lisa, who are now doing a duo project, they loved it so much, the pre-recorded part. They said, we really want you to make a part for contrabass and bass flute. So I'm in the process now of composing a piece for them. And it's going to be very collaborative. I'm going to, tell them basically like a text score at first, what it is I'm interested in and where in the piece, and, just give them time. And then we're going to work through, what their instruments are doing and what they're capable of doing and how we can get these certain sounds kind of happening. And so anyway, I might have jumped the gun and talking about a project ahead of time, but I did want to mention that because, I think it's really important to talk about what's influencing me. It's not just people, it's animals. And I've done a lot of work with trees, and I'm really interested in the relationship between us and trees. So yeah, I'm really interested in all that stuff. Kind of went off on a different tangent there, but
it's totally okay. It's cool when people get excited. We are going to do things out of order though, because you've queued me up for a question I wanted to ask you. It just wasn't necessarily the one we had planned to ask next. Do you have any projects on your workbench that you're particularly excited about? Or a thing we've been asking folks lately is if there are any dream projects, if they could just manifest one that would show up tomorrow. Do you have something you've always wanted to do that just the pieces haven't fallen in place yet?
I really love that question. One of the projects I'm working on is this collaboration with Tessa and Lisa. The other project that I'm working on is with 3 other musicians. Andres Carrizo, a Panamanian composer who lives here in Colorado Springs, and Haleh Abgari, who's a vocalist who also lives here in Colorado Springs, Persian American vocalist, and Colin McAllister, guitarist, who also is a professor here at UCCS. So we're working on a project we're calling Son Lingua. We're all really fascinated by language, and we're working with endangered languages. So we're working with some poets right now who are writing poetry in their native tongue. One from Chiapas, a Zoque poet, and another from Guatemala. And so we're working with them in composing music around some of their poetry, which is really fascinating, really beautiful project. We're working on an album right now. I got some money for us from the Puffin Foundation. So we're working, that's something that's happening right now. We're working on. It's beautiful. The music's just gorgeous. And another project that I'm working on is a little bit divergent from the flute. I've found with deep listening that it can, I mentioned this briefly before, but it can trigger a little bit of trauma if someone has some trauma, and we all have some trauma. It can make a person feel vulnerable. And so I'm studying trauma. I'm enrolled in several courses and taking classes and developing a kind of a branch of deep listening that's trauma informed. And I'm working with therapists in this center here at UCCS called the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience. And I do have a project that I did receive a grant for, but because it's not official yet, I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'm just going to say that I really love organizing events and bringing people together. And I think one of my jobs as a musician is to be a connector. And it's kind of what you're doing. You're connecting people. And I think we all are doing it. Even if we don't know that we're doing it, I think musicians and artists like us are connectors. We're connecting people all the time. And so I love organizing events. I've organized numerous big events in my life, always inviting people to do something together. And so I've got something that I'm cooking up. The pot is brewing for an event in which artists are going to come And we'll all be working also with the communities, stressed communities, underserved communities, veterans, PTSD diagnosed clients from the Lyda Hill and other places, and creating opportunities for them to explore art making with artists.
Well, we will stay tuned.
So that's something that's a dream project that's actually probably coming true very soon. So more about that later.
Yeah, we'll stay tuned for details as they become more publicly available. Our last question for our gathering today, you kind of touched on your desire to explore and to experiment outside of your personal box. Do you have advice for performers who would like to explore maybe your compositions, but might feel intimidated or not yet prepared to do so?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm all about play, like playfulness. And I'm really interested in composing compositions that invite the player to bring their personality, to bring whatever technique they're using to the table, you know, wherever they are in their playing and in their process and their journey of musicianshiphood. I don't know if that's a word.
I like it.
It is now.
Yeah, like this, you know what I mean? Like this livelihood of being a musician and artist wherever you are. So I love composing pieces that have some openness to them and playfulness. I would, I guess, just encourage everyone to improvise a little bit every day, you know, and it could just mean that you play a piece that you're already playing and you take one little measure from it and you just start like creating a little fantasy out of it, a little fun little piece out of one little measure or a theme or a motif, and just start playing, and without any purpose, right? Like
Yeah.
the purpose is to have fun, or the purpose is to just be in your body and perform and play and enjoy the moment of making notes and sounds, right? Incorporating that which you might not like. Because one of the things that really I discovered for myself that was really important for me was, as I aged, my idea of what was right and beautiful and pure and perfect got a little bit askew. And I began to really enjoy the dirt and the grit and the muddiness and the messy and the yucky and the gross and the like, ugh, and incorporate that into my music. And what I realized is that in every art form, whether it's storytelling or like literary art or sculpture or painting or music, you've got to have tension, you've got to have the grit, and you got to have the release. There's got to be the tension, the you know, the fight, I'm in the belly of the whale, you know, and then the coming out of it and the transformation. So it's always about the journey, this transformative journey. And so what is it to start with grit and transform and come out of that? And, you know, even the wonderful writer Joseph Campbell talks about there is sublime in the monster.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so how do we acknowledge that? I mean, there's a lot of monstrous dirt, grit, horrible things going on in the world. And so and a lot of us are suffering in a lot of different ways. And so, you know, playing music isn't just about masking that or just playing music to play pretty. It can be playing music to express that hurt, that anger, that dirt, right? And it can be a relief to be in that moment of tension and then finding the pathway to this release, and finding enjoyment in all of this expressivity, right? I mean, we don't want to create so much tension that we're bringing in trauma, but just oscillating that tension with this release, with this sense of, you know, I can breathe through this. I can get through this. All that stuff is temporary.
Sure.
You know, I can do this, right? So I just invite people to explore, you know, what they love, what they don't love, what they don't really like, and maybe just keep playing it. Another musician who was really influential was Peter Kowald, a bass player from Wuppertal. And he would say, play everything you don't like until you love it.
Mm-hmm.
And play everything you love until you hate it. And then combine and then love it all. And then just play everything, right? He would say, you know, when you're improvising, you know, you've got this metaphorical table, and it's just all of it's on the table. The cliche, the thing you always do that you go back to because it's comfortable, the thing you hate, the mystery thing, the thing you don't know, right? The other stuff, the da-da-da-da-da, like it's all on the table. And when you're improvising, you just are like, oh, I'm going to take this. I'll play that. Oh, there's that cliche. This is a perfect moment for that cliche. You know, ha, ha, ha. You just put it in there, right? And then there's the thing you hate. Oh, this is the perfect time for the thing I hate. Ooh, you know, like that. And so you just sort of, you know, choose. It's all about choices, and you just pick and choose the things that are just in the right moment right now, that are just perfect timing for this moment. I have a whole talk about improvisation, which I won't go into, but yeah, there's that, you know,
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that quote, and my students can look forward to hearing it often.
Yay. Peter Kowald, we love him. He's so wonderful.
Jane, this has been amazing. This has been so inspiring. I hope we can have you back on and talk more about some of your projects that are coming up. And
thank you for joining us for another episode of Music Crush. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also support the podcast, read show notes, and learn more about FNMC by visiting www.flutenewmusicconsortium.com.